Hey, everybody. I'm Sean Robinson. Over to my left is Carson Grubaugh, and joining us as always, for Formalism Friday is Mr. Brandon Graham. And gentlemen, today we have a very special episode of Formalism Friday, where we take our feet and we dip it into the water of controversy.
Oh boy, it's nice to have the band back together. By the way, all three of us.
Certainly, yeah. It's a funny idea because it's only controversial because the internet is the dumbest place imaginable. It's not. It's like let's try to discuss something which there's contention about, like sane people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So this bewildering thing that happened this week is somebody noticed that somebody traced something, and it's been very interesting to see some of the reaction to this, which is like, because to me it's like, no duh, look at these stiff looking things. I mean,
so here's the initial image, and this same character here has been flipped, and this one's pretty obvious, but it's these two characters from the X-Men showed up in it's a Wonder Woman cover.
It's a
trial of the Amazons.
Yeah.
And there's a GIF. There's a GIF. I don't know if this shows up, but it shows the overlay of how accurate it is.
Yeah, and so this most recent one, the one that is the swipe, is from a Wonder Woman comic. And who's the artist? You guys?
The swipe Jones. Is Joel Jones, yeah.
And Pepe La Raza. But what I don't know. I don't really care about this in general. What I found most interesting was that the defense of the swipe seemed to be that there are they talk about Wally Wood, that, like, back in the day, those guys were working so fast that they were always swiping from each other. Like, people swipe totally. Raymond, they'd swipe from themselves. Like, they'd cut out a panel that they already did and paste it on there. So, but then beyond that, the defense seemed to have been that, look, there's these pose books that are out there that are intended to be swiped from. It's like, open copyright, and that maybe they both just had the same pose book, because this here seems to be combined this with the legs from this. So maybe they just had the same book.
Right. So let's just talk about first how asinine both of those reactions are. So this panel right here, how many different viewpoints do you guys see in this? I mean, are any of these characters being viewed from the same angle as each other? I mean, obviously every single character is referenced referenced from something.
I assume so.
Am I wrong?
Well, they look like stylistically different.
Headshots. Yeah, it's a weird thing, because I don't know if you have the full image up, but I think it's actually like a really cool image when you see the whole thing, and the traced characters look really like they don't really fit as well.
Let's see if we can find the full.
Yeah, I think the weirdest thing about it to me is just that, like, there's kind of like a culture in a lot of superhero comics where I was equating it to people I know that have worked with artists from superhero comics, and they will just, like, change somebody's work without asking their permission.
Right.
And I felt like it's kind of in the same vein of this, like, anything to get the final product done, which is like the death of art.
Did you see that story earlier also that came out yesterday, Brandon?
Yeah, we can get into that too, because I've seen similar things where so an artist on Daredevil, I think, had his work corrected by the Marvel production people,
editorial staff, who decided that.
And it's like, it's super, like, the way he explains it, it's really hard to not be on his side, because he's like, they changed my artwork, they made it look worse, and I told them that I would do, or I think he did the changes and they just didn't use his version because it had already gone to press or something. And the reasoning is super dumb, because I think it's them trying to make it less racist, and they just make her look like a vampire. But
it looks more like kabuki makeup to me. Like, to me, this looks more racist caricature.
Well, it's just his first one is a good drawing. It's a caricature, and it seems like it's just an Asian character.
Yeah, the motivations are so dumb to make a drawing with the word, because intent does really matter. And when the artist is like, oh, I just was drawing an Asian girl, and someone was like, I think you kind of have to leave art to explore a little bit. But my frustrating thing about this is I 100% think this will hurt this guy's career because he publicly said they did this.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it seems like he was just irritated that the fact that they just disregarded him. But yeah, Lane, I mean, basically what this means, if this is really an active editorial policy that they have, is that, for instance, like, one of the greatest artists working in comics today, the gentleman who does, oh, my brain, Carson, the book that we
Human
looked
Target,
at,
right?
the young girl who the manga about the young girl who it's like a Godzilla, a backdoor Godzilla.
Urasawa.
Yeah.
Urasawa.
So this basically means that Urasawa wouldn't be able to draw comics for Marvel because he has Asian characters and he caricatures them based on their looks and their personality. I mean, this
looks like an Urasawa face too.
It sure does. That was the thing that made me think about it.
But then it goes back to the insanity of people being like, well, he's Asian, so he can draw things completely missing that, like that goes back to intent for me, because if the drawing exists on its own, then it doesn't really matter. Like, hopefully authenticity comes through in the work, but I feel like it doesn't necessarily. I don't know. We're living in very dumb times in art, and the way that people approach art is like, I mean, it's fantastic that Carson's a teacher, because you can talk to people about, like, calm down, you crazy people.
No, you can't. That's the last place you can do it. I'm in Alabama, so there's a little bit more of a barrier there. But no, but to me, it's like, within tolerance for our best representation of Asian characters, this to me looks more like a caricature of like a kabuki with the makeup and stuff. That looks more stereotypical. This just looked like you had a kid in the neighborhood that you photographed, and that's what she looked like. These look, especially this one, to me looks way more caricatured.
Well, the person who's adding those on can't draw on. The person who drew it initially can.
Well, and it makes it look not like eyelids, but like the kabuki makeup, kind of.
Right. Well, and to go back to the insanity of the Joelle Jones swipe thing, I guess the thing that just gets me is it all looks so generic. I mean, I haven't read a book like this in so many years. I'm a total old fogey. But when I see any of this type of stuff, unless you see hyper stylized superhero stuff, any of the superhero stuff, it all looks just so formless and generic to me, because they're all swiping from the same sources. And I have no doubt that both of them own that Pose book, but she apparently chose to grab her colleague's work and just, she probably has it digitally. She just popped it into there and just worked right on top of it. I mean, I guess I don't really, maybe the thing that I'm surprised about is just the surprise, because to me, like, the bar for producing something like that is obviously so low. I don't know if I'm
like that. Like, does it really matter? Because who cares?
Exactly.
Like, you're making the scene that you need to make for the story. And that's kind of the Wally Wood defense, is like you're not here to be this amazing, you're here to tell a story, and like, who gives a shit where you get the images from?
You think you can tell an effective story with effective acting if you Greg landed up and every single thing is swiped from a different source? I think it's an anathema to good storytelling and good comics to have everything referenced this way.
And past that, I'd even say obviously this is done digitally and just like probably directly traced, but we were talking before about using, like, I use a fair amount of reference. I know Carson uses reference.
Oh yeah, but everything I draw is like, I go take a photograph for it.
Yeah, but it's easy from my point of view. It's easier to redraw something and change it up a bit. Like, if I was in this position and I had that X-Men comic and someone was like, do a pose like this, it'd be easier for me to kind of fudge it and redraw it and change them up. And like not for nothing, this is a good X-Men drawing, but it's like, it doesn't mean it's the best drawing ever produced and everything is flawed. Like, you'd think that like that's not how I draw hands. I would change it more how I draw hands, and so it's this weird thing where it's like one of the major points of art is to put yourself in the art, and so if you're just taking something that is not you and you're not putting your style on it very much, then it kind of defeats the purpose. And I know this is a Wonder Woman comic, but I do think you can still have craft and intent in everything you do, and I think that's kind of the major problem with a lot of superhero books on both the art tracing and the people reworking stuff, is it's not being seen as art. It's just like banging out a product, and that's why I don't read books like that very often.
That's what I'm saying. Like within the context of what it's trying to do, I don't really like, I'm not as interested in reading it, but like what you're trying to do is just tell a cool superhero story and you're trying to get it out as quick as possible. It's like, yeah, screw it, do this, like just swap the same pose in, because you know, like how many times can you come up with your own like Cyclops jumping forward with the leg out, you know, like so it's the same pose that Jim Lee drew, you know, like, so I don't know, to me it's I think I'm more, I like appropriation too as an artistic device. Now if I were going to do it, I would do it so it had like meaning to it, like I'm trying to like by making it like obviously someone else's stuff, I'm trying to make you think about the meaning of that style, which this isn't doing. But I think it's an interesting strategy. It's just the kickback seems to be that, you know, there's none of that. It just seems like a quick way to get a page done, and people don't appreciate that. But if you're buying a superhero book, why the fuck do you care?
Well, I think that the reason that people are irritated is it exposes the lie that these are just purposely composed images. I mean, seriously, take a look at this top one here. I know we're only seeing a portion of it, but what in the hell is happening that this person has to fire an arrow over to his right, while this other person is flying with a tremendous amount of foreshortening with their arms back for some reason? This other person in the front is on a different level. I mean, the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. It's just the most chaotic,
shooting around the armpit.
It's like nonsense to me. It's like someone took a bunch of stickers on their refrigerator and just moved them around until they had something that was roughly pleasing to them. And they're both like that. I mean, that's the thing that's, to me, it's just like the source material there is just the exact same kind of composition. What in the hell is he doing? Aren't they going to fall on their faces?
But
like
this
that?
one seems like you're here looking up in a more consistent way.
Yeah, no, that one seems to be thought about, at least, you know, visually, like slightly more consistent. But I mean, I guess that the people are irritated because it's exposing the sort of underlying aspect of it, which is like, it's just not. I don't know. Am I missing?
I wonder if people are irritated. I mean, the difficult thing is the comics press is essentially run on outrage. So if they did an amazing issue of Wonder Woman and everything came together beautifully, we would hear about it less than this, which is also.
Yeah, I mean, this is like on Bleeding Cool. We were just talking about like swipe stuff ahead of time, and this was, you know, I'm not trying to pick on Joelle Jones. I mean, Bleeding Cool does this to whip people up, and they've been doing this swipe file stuff for a long time. Sure. Actually, I tried to send them, Sean, we're gonna be doing the Grant Man What the Fuck book, and that whole book is almost entirely composed out of swipes. And a long time ago, like when I finished that book in 2015, 16, I sent it to Bleeding Cool trying to get them to just give it away for free, because I thought, and I didn't want my name attached to it or anything. I just wanted it to be this mysterious comic that went around the internet that looked like it had been drawn by 24 different people. And I thought Bleeding Cool would eat that up because of the swipe file shit. And like, it wasn't, yeah, they just never did it. And I was like, man, I'm
too much work.
A free comic to give away. But it wasn't controversial enough. So, I mean,
back up. Well, explain what that is.
I mean, maybe we'll do another video. It's just a parody of Grant Morrison's Batman R.I.P.
Oh, right.
Each page is drawn in the style of a different famous artist. So Jim Lee, really botched John Romita Jr. That's the one guy I couldn't. He's too hard.
It's really funny. But it's like structurally you were aiming for it to be a pastiche on purpose. That's like
the swipes.
It's just totally different. The functionality of somebody who just takes existing something and, you know, plops it all together. I guess the thing that the outrage I want to push back against is just like, what did you expect? Like, how do you think these are put together? Like,
yeah,
when
that's
I
why
look
it
at
doesn't
that,
bother me. It's like you're buying Wonder
wow.
Woman. Like, what are you pissed off about? You're there for a fun, dumb superhero story about the trial of the Amazons. Who gives a shit if they copied it from somewhere else? Like, do you get your fun, dumb?
Wow, I think it makes for poor storytelling. And you know, the whole
Yeah.
Wally Wood dictum. I mean, Wally Wood could draw his ass off. So like, if Wally Wood wants to trace a bunch of machinery to pop behind one of his characters, or you know, is stealing like a the line of a figure or something. I mean, it's like he's incorporating it into what he's doing because he's a beast. You know, I mean, he's making it serve him. All that stuff is like it's the master. I mean, their reference is the master, you know.
So that's where, Brandon, you sent some instances of like artists that we think of as true geniuses that have used reference real heavily, and probably the difference there is how they're warping it to their needs. Is that what we would?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it is that they're referencing photographs as well.
Instead of other artists.
Oh, that's a nice photograph.
These won't blow up bigger.
Oh yeah, so these
cool.
are Milo Manara referencing different photographs.
Wow.
And you can see her there. I can't blow it up though, which is unfortunate. Yeah. And then this one's.
Yeah, and that one's really blatant, but I feel like this is the place where like that's a really interesting drawing, I think, because he's taking this like kind of blown out photograph and like showing how you do that with just ink lines, and I think that's really impressive.
Are these his photographs that he took though?
I don't think so.
No,
because this looks more found, but this looks like he might have a model and he said, okay, make these faces. The more obvious examples you sent were the Moebius ones, which when I saw you post these, I was pretty thrilled because Moebius has always been like this unassailable, like must have all this shit in his head visionary to me. And then to see that like even he was finding like Marlboro ads or whatever.
He gets really blatant in really funny ways. There's a couple of them where he would just like use, like one of them, I think he used the box cover for like Dances with Wolves as a blueberry cover.
So that seems to have more like meaning packed into it, right? He's kind of playing a joke.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think part of it is, I wonder if it was a joke, but I think part of it is just he's kind of, you know, he's salad barring it. He's taking what he wants from the original thing, right, and
leaving the rest behind.
Yeah, that's from that John Wayne movie that a huge amount of the cast died because they filmed it on irradiated soil, where John Wayne's playing Genghis Khan.
Jesus. But this one, even the costume, which looks like a real, you think of like kind of Moebius-isms, like they're all there in the original. I mean, this character changed quite a bit. And the perspective on this character is a little different.
The salad bar aspect, that's sort of the Wood, that's sort of what's missing from the discussion of the Wood dictum, you know, because he's putting that stuff together. I mean, everything is going into the mix, you know. Referencing is just one aspect of what it is he's using.
Yeah, that one is a better, I think, example of taking something and then really modifying it.
Yeah, and it's like the Moebius drawing on that. I think like the knee in the shadow looks better than the photograph. So he's taking something as almost like a jumping off point.
Yeah, look at how he's pushed the leg out further so that it's more obviously relaxed. The bow of the leg there, and the drop. This
reminds me of a story where years ago I lived in a house with a bunch of different comic artists, and one of the younger guys came in one day with one of the drawings he'd done, and he was like, I can't figure out why this picture isn't working, and me and another guy went over it and we're like, oh well, this needs to be done this way and this needs to be done this way for it to work, and he couldn't understand why it could be wrong because he traced it from a photograph. And we all just laughed because we're just like, you can't just trace stuff, like reality doesn't, like, you know, illustrations, you got to fake reality, so reality sometimes doesn't quite cut the mustard.
That's a really interesting observation, actually. I just had my students read an article by Anthony Wachulis, and it's called What is Realistic? And he talks about the fact that because a large part of how you think about objects is your mental conception of them, which match like a very straightforward or side-on iconic representation of the thing, that oftentimes if you get it exactly perfectly photo referenced, it enters the uncanny valley because it's not matching your mental conception. And so as an artist, really, to get realism, you're aiming for something in between veracity to the stimulus and appeasing the cartoon brain.
Well, especially with action stories, that's the thing. It's so stiff. I mean, all the things we were looking at and the people swiping from each other. I mean, it's all. I mean, I'm frozen in time, you know. And some of the most educational reading about that stuff I've ever did was the books drawn to life, written by a Disney animator, and you know, he's just has all these. He ran a Disney workshop for a long time where he did life drawing sessions for Disney animators and would tear apart their life drawings, and was basically like, you see all of his 10-second sketches that look like they're just jumping off the page, and because he's like, oh, open that arm up, you know, what's the intention of the action, you know, and all this discussion about like if somebody's about to move, the pre-movements that they make and how you can exaggerate those things, you know, on the page. And like, you just, even that Mobius sitting down thing, you see how he's just angled that leg out because the purpose is the relaxation and the leg is anchoring it, you know.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't know. It just seems like if you're making an action book, you make a damn action book. Don't make it look like it's your DVD collection, freeze framed. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but this is how I tried to learn a walk cycle, as a freeze framed, like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode. And I remember how weird and unsatisfying it was to look at Michelle Gellar, you know, with their legs just barely moving, and just like, that's not what it looks like.
Oh, so you want to do a more exaggerated version? I actually, one of the things I do, my kind of version of life drawing, is I'll pause dance videos and draw that, because if you get it mid movement and try to have to draw a blur, I think it's kind of fun. I was thinking, kind of two points I wanted to make is one, whenever I look at things like the X-Men image, I get caught up in the idea of how divorced from reality a lot of that is, because as cartoony as I draw, I sometimes will try to be like, what's the connection of this to reality? And like something like the Cyclops run, it's like, maybe football players run like that, but I've never Naruto run with my head forward and my arms and fists like that. And it's an excellent drawing. Yeah, but it also is like not a pose that I can relate to. And it gets this weird thing where superhero comics start to stand on each other's shoulders, and then it becomes this like shorthand. But I wonder if you showed this to somebody that had only dealt with reality, if it would even make sense to them. But maybe that's a statement on comics in general. The other thing, the way that Mobius got bitten by, what were you going to say?
No, he's going to fall on his face. I mean, he's got his arms all the way out and he's got his fists. He's going to just plant his face right in the gravel, and there's going to be no way to protect him.
And maybe that's a fatal flaw in me approaching superhero stuff, because it's not like I draw superhero comics. And the other thing I was going to say is that the time that Mobius, that Jimi Hendrix image actually is the time that using reference kind of bit Mobius. Because that one he did directly off of a photograph of Jimi Hendrix, and it's pretty similar. And the original photographer, I think, threatened to sue him, so he did a whole series of Jimi Hendrix, like a Jimi Hendrix portfolio. And I don't know the accuracy, but the story is that Mobius was worried that people would think that he was a huge Jimi Hendrix fan because he was trying to get himself out of hot water by drawing a bunch of his stuff, but he wasn't super into his work.
Interesting. Here's it talking about the Cyclops run versus
Oh yeah, and that's that famous Empire Strikes Back thing where he drew that tiny thing in the background, and then they reworked it for the Imperial probe droid in Empire Strikes Back.
This thing, yeah,
that is wild. Okay.
But this looks like a real, like this looks like he got a shot of a football player.
Yeah,
like exactly like he's supposed to have the football tucked in his hand right there.
Oh yeah, it does look very football.
Right, like Sean, you're talking about like maybe a football player would be in the Cyclops pose. That's what a football player looks like. Guaranteed 100%. That's a football pose. Absolutely. He's bumping the shoulder. He's holding the football right there.
It'd be funny to see what the Cyclops drawing looked like next to that.
Like if you put it
like from the side. He's just like fully leaning forward with his arms out.
Well, that would be like when people did the Milo Manara Spider Woman, and they're like, you got the anatomy all wrong on it, and it's like, who are you to talk to Manara?
That that Cyclops pose. There's actually a Liefeld drawn. I'm gonna get you in trouble here, Brandon. There's a
No,
Liefeld drawing.
He's
Brandon's
not
not
a
part of
great
this part of the
illustrator.
conversation.
I cannot defend Liefeld as an illustrator, and I've given up trying to. So continue.
I'm not going to be able to think of the particular issue it's from, but it's some X-Force comic that was burned into my brain that has basically the Cyclops pose from the side, and it's like two people running side by side, and they just look like they're vertical, like they're just leaping over, you know.
I will say something like, funny about Liefeld's work is he's actually gotten improved dramatically as an illustrator, but I feel like it almost cuts into the fun of his stuff, because back in the 90s, it was so nonsensical, and there were things that like there's a hilarious page called like the funniest like 40 Rob Liefeld drawings. And the narration is just like, here's a beautiful illustration of the Human Torch and the Thing passionately making love. You know, like the guy just breaks apart like why this stuff doesn't work. And you know, when you read an old Youngblood, it's so much passion and fun that he's having in it, that I think it carries through, and it doesn't matter if it's inaccurate, or because it's his style. And the funny thing about Liefeld is that, I mean, I feel like I could name so many people that are worse at comics than him, because he can there's at least passion in it.
Oh yeah.
I love his shit, like, or at least used to. By the way, we swiped this.
Oh yeah, that's the cover of it's in a box around here somewhere.
Yeah, that's the cover of You Don't Know Jack, which will also be being re-released soonish.
Yeah, well, we've probably slagged on these poor people enough, but I hope that the intention comes clear, is that like, this is, I don't know, I mean, people must like it. It just looks so stiff to me. It just feels like,
well, I think like the intention here is to be like, look, this is a practice that happens all the time, whether from photographs is probably better, but even then, like, you know, I try to not use other people's photos. I try and go take my own, and I have ways
control over it.
Yeah, I have ways of like dealing with like trying to get things that aren't stiff, like having people act through, because like if you tell someone I need you to express this, they'll be like, but if you just like, I'll just put two people in, I'll pay for their dinner and just say, hey, you guys talk for an hour, and I'm just going to be going around taking photos. And then all the weird faces that they make in between, even if they're not having an angry conversation, you can find an angry, like, in between face. And I found that gets more naturalism. But you're kind of poking fun at Greg Land. I think there, it seems to me like a lot of work, because like, dude, you're having to sift through so many muscle magazines and sports photos to find the guy in the position you want. Like,
I don't think they do. I just think that they just grab the thing they have on hand. I mean, that's the thing that's so weird about it. It doesn't read to me like somebody telling a story visually. It reads to me like somebody who has a collection of nudie magazines and has clipped out their favorite ones and assembled them together. I mean, I that's the thing, is it just doesn't, I'm not convinced by the storytelling. You know, Bill Sienkiewicz, when he was working on Big Numbers, I mean, every single panel of Big Numbers was referenced, right? But he hired all the models, and he got them to his house, and he set them up in the locations, and he worked, you know, from it. And also he has that same thing we were talking about before, of the ability to synthesize the different aspects of what he's doing and then kind of tie it all together in a bow. So like, that's more photo reference than the stuff we're talking about here. And yet it's transformed in a way that gives it a sort of surface and communicative ability that I don't see you can do when you're just moving a bunch of stickers around.
Yeah, I think that's like, and I'm somebody like, I will just, you know, I do take photo reference, but it's usually like a buildings of things, but I will just dig around and find whatever works and throw it in there. And it was, I've told the story before, but it was kind of a big epiphany for me when I started hanging out with DJs, and I realized they could take other music and mix it together and make music. But I think the problem with something like the Joel Jones thing is it's not mixing, and it's not stirred in enough. So you're just basically just taking the full hook from a Police song and putting it in your Biggie verse, and you're just like, that's not the same song. You're just and so it's like, yeah, that's my main issue with it. And it's more just it's an anti-personal expression is my main thing. And I feel like if you find a way to trace somebody's work even and make it personal expression, then that's where the art lies. But it just is like, I don't know. It feels really hollow and unnecessary and not even lazy, but incurious, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
I suppose the natural endpoint to all this is just having 3D models of all the characters that will just,
Well, they do
Marvel
that.
HQ puts a list out of what it is that they want, that particular one, and then it's instantly rendered and available, right?
I mean, a lot of them already use like poser programs, right?
Right.
So you have the 3D model that you can pose, and then they manipulate it from there.
Are you familiar with the manga Gantz?
I actually really like that.
Yeah. So
Have you not read that, Sean?
No, I've seen
Gantz is really good, but you can tell it's all
trashy.
I actually really like it. That would make well, it starts out really kind of cyclical and trashy, but by the end of it, it gets really interesting. It would make a fucking amazing HBO show.
Does he use Poser then, or
Yeah,
something along those lines?
it's all done in Poser, I think, and there are some kind of, basically they make little mannequin people, and then he traces over it.
There's the mannequin people.
Yeah, but it starts out a little more. It gets worse as it goes, in terms of that computer sensibility. It kind of starts off better, but I actually really like this. It's pretty obviously computerized, but the backgrounds are as well. But I really enjoy that.
That one's
series.
flat enough that I'm not really getting it. It's when it's the angle stuff that's telling. Yeah, I don't think
it does look like Game of Tekken.
Right, exactly. I feel like I'm looking at a bunch of screen tone on top of a Tekken screenshot.
Yeah, he's really good at pulling you in the trashiest ways imaginable. Like
the story is like really compelling, and the further it goes, like the better it gets. And his monster designs, which are obviously all like 3D mock-ups that they use as well, are really cool. I don't know. I'll defend Gantz. I'm actually hoping that Dark Horse does one of these deluxe hardcovers like they've been doing with Berserk of Gantz. I would buy that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very interesting because this is exactly what I was just. There it is.
Yeah, this is what you were saying you fear.
Right. But, yeah. Well, there you go. So no need to fear. Already here. Now, if we can just get Cyclops with his arms both out and both his legs back and a knee up, I really do want to see that rotated.
But like, there's some shit like that's like, I don't know. It's like Ennio Asano, who does Goodnight Pun. He uses a boatload of computer generated backgrounds and stuff like that. And
this does remind me of Asano stuff. And I shouldn't say this publicly, but Asano stuff like is hard for me to look at because it's so muddy sometimes.
It's
like,
so densely detailed. Yeah.
Going on. And it does feel like, and it's interesting because watching the Monben, the Urasawa's documentary about stuff, the Asano one is, I feel like he's the only guy that actually acknowledges that a computer is involved in the process. And everyone else is just like, in a room with a piece of paper.
But like, this is very obvious. Like, they just have a 3D model of the background. But I agree that sometimes Ennio Asano, sometimes people like this, that it gets a little muddy because they're not going back in and controlling the values. They're just letting the toning be what it's going to be. I don't know. I like Gantz. Anyways, we're going to veer off topic here, but I think the point we wanted to make was we're not trying to pick on any artists in particular. It's just that the Joel Jones thing happened like in the last couple of days, and we thought it was an interesting topic about like this is something that happens all the time, and there are people that pull it off where we go, yeah, great, cool, wonderful, like Moebius, he's amazing. And then there's other times where it's like and I think we were just interested in like what's when and where and how and like what the intent is.
Yeah, I think Brandon, you got the closest to identifying it here as not cooked in, and I think that is a very good way to think about it. Like, you've made this dish and then you put a bunch of raw chicken on the top of it, and it hasn't got a chance to integrate with the rest of it, right? You've like had this simmered this dish for like 2 hours, and then here comes the raw chicken right on top. And
weird
I
too,
think
because Jones, I think, actually in her Wonder Woman run, like I have issues with like her backgrounds are not my favorite, but I think she has a style.
Yeah.
And so it's more disappointing because it's like, you can clearly do this, just do it. But sorry to cut you off, Sean. What were you saying?
Oh, no. I think as these visual media and images on the web become more and more ubiquitous, and tracing becomes more and more ubiquitous, and everything being photo referenced becomes more and more ubiquitous, we're going to see a push in the other direction where something becomes as obviously handmade as possible. And the one little anecdote I wanted to maybe leave us with is I was recording something with somebody back in 2016, I think it was, and I was irritated that the piano part that I was about to lay down, the piano was slightly out of tune, and I was like, oh really, we really should have had this tune before we did this session, and the guy who it was his song I was about to play on, he just looked at me and he said, well, that's how people can tell it's not a sample.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, you're probably right. And sure enough, people will listen to a recording that I've played the piano, and they're like, what's that banging sound? It's like, oh, that's the sound of the pedal. That's my foot on the pedal. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, when you hear
right?
a slide on a guitar.
Yeah,
sure, right.
Yeah.
All of these little things that like distinguish something, an actual performance from a simulacrum of a performance.
Yeah.
I think that those are things that might have a different kind of cachet in future land.
I think they both run side to side now. I don't think that there's going to be these peaks and waves. Just these people are going to be doing this thing, and these people are going to be doing this thing. And people like me, I'll go back and forth happily. Like simulacrum is interesting on its own to me. If the Wonder Woman story was good, I could care less if the art was too plastic.
That Gantz thing just makes me want to pull my eyes out. I'm sorry to tell you, I can't even believe that people read it and it looks like that. I
don't know if
I love that book.
expressed
It's awesome.
to you, I don't know if we've expressed to you, Sean, how many titties are in that book.
Okay.
But like at the end, there's so many cool monsters, and like I don't know, the story like takes a turn. I don't know. Dark Horse. That's like that and Lone Wolf and Cub in those big ass hardcovers. Those are like my two Dark Horse properties that next when you're over with Berserk and that other one that looks like garbage.
Oh, I want them to do an artist edition of Appleseed, which will probably never happen, but
that would be tight too. Yeah. But
okay, well, we'll write to Santa and hope it happens. So
we'll get it done as well.
Yeah.